Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. The case I'm going to be looking into today is the disappearance of Alissa Turney. I'd just like to let you know that I mean no offence to anyone I'm going to speak about today. I've just gathered the information off the internet to make into a video for educational purposes. Alissa was born on the 3rd of April 1984. And was only 3 years old when her mother, Barbara, met and subsequently married her stepfather, Michael Turney. Michael had three children from his previous marriage and Barbara had 2. So it was quite a large family. And they were just one big family. Michael and Barbara would go on to have a child that they called Sarah. Unfortunately, in the early 90s, Barbara would actually be diagnosed with lung cancer and would pass away shortly after her diagnosis. Alissa was only 9 at the time, and it must have been so difficult for Alissa, for all the family, being so young and just losing such a precious soul. Sarah and Alissa were then, of course, raised by Michael, and they actually lived in Phoenix. Alissa was described as a very strong and caring person, and she was just a typical teenager. She'd go and do typical things like going to the mall. But during her childhood, Michael kind of made out that Alissa was really tough to deal with, and he had to be really strict with her. And obviously as she went into her teens, she did kind of mellow out a little bit, but he was still very strict with her. He kind of kept up with this facade that she was very wild, and yes, she was a teenager, she liked to party, she would drink underage, but it would seem that Michael kind of led people to believe that she was more wild and more out of control than she actually was. At the time of her disappearance, she was 17. She was a junior in high school and she worked in a Jack-in-the-Box. Sarah, her sister, was only 12 at the time of her disappearance. Now, the sisters would have a very different relationship with their father. So towards Sarah, he was so laid back, he was so cool. But with Alissa, like I said, he was very uptight and very strict. He would basically say to Sarah that it was because Alissa needed more guidance and direction in her life. Like I said, he made people believe that she was very out of control. And tensions between the two because of this would be very high. Now, the girls did fight like normal sisters would. They fought over hair, clothes, makeup, but Sarah did say that they did actually grow closer as Sarah was entering, kind of getting into her teens, and this was just before she disappeared. On the 17th of May 2001, Alissa went to school, and it was the last day of school before summer break. Michael picked her up early that day, and I must say there was no reason for this. Nobody knows why he did this, but he did anyway, and they went for lunch. And it would seem that they kind of had an argument over Michael being so strict with her. She wanted to stay out longer and not have to tell him everything about her life, where she was all the time, every little aspect. But he disagreed. He would never let that happen as long as she lived under his roof, she followed his rules, because he would worry. And Alissa was, by all accounts, very upset by this. Like I said, he was 2 different parents with his children. He was kind of like Jekyll and Hyde. With Alissa, he was this strict, stern man, but with Sarah, he basically let her do whatever she wanted. And Alissa was 17, she wanted more freedom. Who can blame her at that age? She's coming up to 18, and she wanted to just have a little bit more slack, but her father wasn't willing to give it her. They eventually went home, and apparently Alissa went up and stormed off to her room. And Michael then apparently left to pick up his other daughter Sarah from school. When Michael failed to turn up from school, as school was getting out, Sarah walked to a friend's house to basically wait for him. Somewhere between 4 and 5, her father finally turned up. And he asked her if she'd call Alissa. She wasn't answering his calls, and he was worried about her. So, using her father's phone, she tried to contact Alissa. And they would continue to try and contact her throughout the journey home, which I believe was around about 10 minutes. So they did live quite close to her school. They couldn't seem to reach Alissa. Sarah went straight to Alissa's bedroom, where she found the contents of her backpack thrown all across her bed, and her usual very tidy room was a complete wreck. And her phone, which they'd been trying to call, was on top of her dresser with a note beside it. And the note actually said, "Dad and Sarah, when you dropped me off at school today, I decided that I really am going to California. Sarah, you said you wanted me gone. Now you have it. That's why I saved my money. Dad, I took $300 from you." Now, at first, the note wasn't really a super shock because she'd apparently been talking about wanting to go to her aunt's in California before. She wasn't really getting along with her stepfather. The thing that did strike people as odd, though, was that she pretty much left everything behind. Her makeup, her mobile. Surely a girl wanting to move away, at bare minimum, would take her mobile. Not only that, she had plans that night. She told her boyfriend at the time, John Lackman, that she would see him later on at this end of year party that was happening. She also told so many of her friends the same thing. So her plan was certainly to go to this party. So why didn't she go? Why did she decide to run away at that moment in time when she told everyone she would see them later on? It was just very suspicious. I have found that this note was tested, and it is very likely that the handwriting was that of Alissa's, but the timeline as to when this note was actually written is unknown. Again, this supports the fact that she had plans that night. She was going to this party. She could have written this note earlier when she thought about it. It could have been months old, years old even. It could have just been written at any point. So Michael contacted the police that night and he reported Alissa as a runaway. And he used to be a police officer himself. He knew how things worked. And you'll find out what I mean by that a little later on. The police did open a missing persons file, but they didn't actually investigate further into it or do a follow-up, well, because Michael said that she was in California. He said that she'd run away. They didn't put out an Amber Alert. They didn't look for her that night. They didn't really do anything because they believed she was a runaway and that her stepfather actually did know a location, that she was with her aunt in California. So it was about a week later that Michael actually contacted the police and told them that he'd heard of Alissa, that he was to blame for her leaving, she wasn't ever coming back, she apparently cussed at him and swore at him down the phone, and that was pretty much the conversation. And he went on to provide phone records to prove that this call actually took place. The years passed, and Michael would tell his family members that he was really worried that something had happened to Alissa. He thought that something had happened to her, maybe someone had been following her, or even hurt her. And since the police were doing nothing, that he basically had to look for himself. And that's exactly what he did. He actually went to California, or at least he claimed that he did, to, like I said, look for Alissa. He would even pass out missing persons flyers and would make several trips over, by all accounts, to try and keep her story alive in a sense, because in his words, the police weren't doing anything. But again, he'd reported her as a runaway. The police didn't look into it, but because of this, and I do believe that there were some missteps on the police's part as well. They should really have looked into it a little bit more, and maybe things could have been done. Maybe they could have searched for her that night. Maybe they could have found some evidence. Just maybe they could have found something. Alissa's brothers and her family didn't believe that Alissa had run away. They said that really at a push she would have lasted a couple of weeks. She had a bank account with around about $1,800 in it, I believe, and this was not touched after her disappearance. So she ran away, right? Well, why hadn't her bank been touched? Yes, she was supposed to be staying with an aunt, but she'd still need money. What was she living off if she hadn't touched her bank? Well, nothing was really done despite this. Years passed and there were no leads. Then in 2006, Thomas Heimer, who was a serial killer that was actually in jail for the murder of Sarah Goodman, a woman he was travelling with, actually admitted to murdering Alissa. He picked her out. He said that he murdered 21 women, I believe, and he picked her out with a photo. He said that he had sexual relations with her in a motel, and then he killed her and dismembered her body and dumped her body. Police actually looked into it and things didn't really add up with his story. He kept changing things, and they actually began to question whether he had killed her at all. Police continued to look into Thomas, and eventually they did rule him out. Again, things were adding up and he kept changing his story all the time. They believe that he didn't murder Alissa, that he was just making it up, probably for the publicity. He also said that he had actually murdered, I believe, JC Dugard and as you all know, JC was held captive for 18 years, I believe. I covered a story a while ago. So we all know she was alive. So the fact that he was claiming that he murdered her when she hasn't even been murdered, he was just very unreliable, and the police did believe that he was lying. So I believe it was round about then that the police realised that no money had been used from Alissa's bank account. It had not been touched in all these years. They ran a social security numbers and found that they had also been never used. So basically she'd never got a job. She'd not even returned to school. The auntie that Alissa was supposedly staying with, had gone to stay with, had not seen Alissa since before she disappeared. No one had heard from her at all, apart from Michael, who was the last person to have ever seen her. It soon became clear to the police that this wasn't a runaway case after all. Like I said earlier, their father works in the police force. He would have known that reporting Alissa as a runaway would mean that the police wouldn't really look into it much, in the sense of comparing it to a missing person. And they didn't, because according to her father, she was staying with her aunt in Chicago. So this was really rather calculated on his part. I do believe that it wasn't until 2008 that the police really started taking Alissa's missing person case seriously, when additional information led investigators to conduct over 200 interviews with people that actually knew Alissa. The police actually found out that Michael was way more strict than he led anyone to believe, and that he was kind of obsessed with Alissa. They found that he had actually installed security cameras. So not only outside of the home like normal people do, for security reasons you put them outside of your door so that if anyone breaks in, anything like that, you've got the footage. But he actually put them inside his house, and he hid them in things like vents and had them pointed in the living room and things like that, and would secretly record the girls. But he instilled that this was for their own safety. It wasn't to actually monitor them. He would do things like record the girls' phone calls on the landline, which I believe was actually installed way before Sarah was even born. But on Alissa's part, he would go through her things. He would go to her work to make sure that she was there. And he actually admitted it in an interview that he did himself. The police did find out that he was in fact filming the girls, and at one point found footage of Alissa and her boyfriend making out on the sofa. Michael did actually show this to Sarah at some point, which is very strange, but Sarah didn't really think much of it. She was kind of brainwashed, which she did admit herself. So Michael recorded everything. Police asked him for the footage of the day she went missing. He basically said that he had gone through it and there was nothing sort of on it that would relate to a case in any way, and he refused to give it to them. When they asked for the audio tapes recorded of the phone call that day that Alissa rang about a week after her disappearance, when she said she was never coming back, he told them that the recorder had actually been turned off that day and that there was nothing on him. Which, again, very strange. He recorded everything. So on that particular day that Alissa apparently called him, it wasn't turned on. Very, very weird. Sarah has actually admitted herself that until an ABC special kind of episode was aired on the case in 2009, that she never thought her father had anything to do with Alissa going missing. And this was when she actually found out that her father had taken Alissa out of school early and that she was being abused, which she never ever knew before. Michael went on to say that the reason he did pick her up from school early was because Alissa was going to break up with her boyfriend and she didn't want to see him. But her boyfriend confirmed that she popped her head in just before she left, said hi to him, and basically said, "I'll see you later at the party." So it's just all contradicting, really. It doesn't make any sense. Why would Alissa avoid him at school and because she wanted to break up with him, but then go to a party with him and meet up with him later on? Which is what her plans were. So the police asked Sarah to go into the station, and that's when they told her that they thought that her father Michael had something to do with Alissa going missing and that he had abused her. While Sarah was at the police station, they basically had enough probable cause to search Michael's house, and they did so. They found Michael at the mailbox, getting his mail, and he had 2 pistols on him with a ton of ammo. Which, why do you need all that when you just go in to collect your own mail? Very, very weird. When they went inside, they found 19 guns, and get this, 26 homemade pipe bombs, along with a 98-page manifesto written by Michael. He basically said in this manifesto that he believed Alissa had ran away, but that she was followed by men from the electrical union at which he used to work, where he was a whistleblower. He believed that these men took revenge on him by murdering Alissa and dumping her body in Desert Center, California. He planned to attack this hall in revenge. And when they found this, authorities actually estimate that he was only a mere weeks away from actually carrying out this attack. So it's really, really lucky that they did find him when they did, because something like that could have seriously injured or killed so many people. And it's just so, so lucky. Michael was, of course, arrested for the pipe bombs. And they would find during the searches hundreds of video and audio tapes, along with tons of paperwork. And some of this paperwork was contracts that Michael had drew up himself and Alissa had signed. One was dated a year before she disappeared, and it basically claimed that Michael had never abused Alissa and Alissa had signed it. Now, why would anyone do such a thing unless they were in fact abusing someone? Why would you feel the need to write out a contract to say that I've never abused you? It just wouldn't cross your mind unless you actually were doing it. I found it so strange. Police also, like I said, interviewed Alissa's friends and anyone that she knew basically, and asked them if they knew about any abuse. And from what I could find online, they said that she'd spoken to them about Michael abusing her when she was younger. Alissa also told her boyfriend that Michael one day had collected her from school and took her to a completely deserted location where he tried to assault her. There were actually around about 20 statements, I believe, handed to the police by Alissa's friends, family, even a teacher, that all stated that Alissa was being either sexually or physically abused by Michael. I also came across some footage of kind of like a home video. And in this home video, it shows Sarah recording it and her dad is in the background. And Alissa is kind of stood by a tree. Now, Sarah is just talking to her dad as she's trying to record this thing. And Alissa shouts over, "Sarah, out of the blue, Dad's a pervert." And Michael picks up, I don't know, a stick or something like that and throws it at Alissa. And he quickly ends the kind of video. And Sarah actually found this while she was looking through her old videos and things like that. And she actually believes that that was kind of Alissa trying to tell her that obviously Michael was abusing her. But she wouldn't have known. She probably just thought that this was just something she'd randomly said. She was only very young at the time. She probably didn't even think anything of it. I also found that a year before Alissa went missing, Michael made a call to the Child Protective Services. And in this call, he said that his daughter Alissa was going to call him and falsely accuse him of sexually assaulting her because he wouldn't buy her a car. When asked about this, he said that he did actually call, but he only asked them what a parent could do if they were falsely accused. I did find this really strange though. I have read online that Alissa had a car and this would eventually be sold because she was too scared to learn how to drive. Michael wanted her to learn how to drive. He wanted her to have this car so that she could help out with school runs and things like that and help out a little bit more, but she was too scared to drive, so they eventually sold it. So why would he then go on to not buy her a car, saying that she wanted one when she didn't? Michael Turney pleaded guilty and was given 10 years for the possession and the plan to use the destructive material. He actually served 7 years in prison. He was declared to have paranoid personality disorder and required to participate in mental health treatments. And Michael actually got out in 2017. Sarah went through some of Michael's things and she actually found a map. And this map had coordinates on it. When she actually looked up these coordinates, it led to the middle of the desert. And so of course she sent this to the police. But nothing was actually done about it. They didn't really look into it. Back in 2003, a hiker who was going through Desert Center, he came across some bones. Now, they didn't really get anything off them. They couldn't even ascertain the gender. They certainly, all the tests that they did came back inconclusive. So nobody really has any idea as to whether these bones were in fact Alissa's or whether they weren't, but it could potentially have been. So initially, Sarah was campaigning for her dad to be released. She didn't think that he had anything to do with anything. She lost her mum at a young age. In her eyes, she lost her father too. She wanted him out of prison. But this soon quickly changed, and she began campaigning for basically her father to be charged with Alissa's murder. And she did this for so many years. She admitted that it was probably in 2013 that she actually thought he was guilty of the crime. She waged a year-long social media campaign to encourage the investigation into her father for her sister's murder. She shared details about her sister's disappearance in a podcast that she had on social media platforms, even posted videos on YouTube. In April, she decided to move on to TikTok, where she would subvert popular memes to try and get her father charged. And she would rapidly gain over 1 million followers. So her campaign really did grow from this. And not only was she campaigning for justice, she kind of became an amateur sleuth as well. She recorded conversations between her and her father. She would trawl through home videos and post footage on a TikTok account. Sarah publicly shared a video clip recorded in 2000 that shows Michael sat in the parking lot filming Alissa while she was at work at a fast food restaurant. After Michael was released, she actually went on to record a conversation between her and her father, where she asked him what happened to her sister. He basically said, "Be there at my deathbed and I'll give you all the honest answers you want to hear." She asked him why he wouldn't give her the answers now, to which he tells her, "Because you've got them now." Sarah actually believes that her father took Alissa into the middle of the desert and tried to sexually assault her like he'd done so many times before. But this time, maybe she fought back. Maybe she said that she was going to tell someone, and maybe Michael snapped. She thinks that with his knowledge of the desert and the fact that he worked in law enforcement and knew all about that this allowed him to know what to do, and that he basically probably buried her close by to where they were. He went home, he cleaned up, set the scene, then went to pick Sarah up. She believes that he knew exactly what he was doing. Almost 2 decades later, Michael Turney, at the age of 72, had been finally charged with second-degree homicide. It's not really clear as to whether Sarah's online efforts kind of prompted the charge, and a police spokeswoman declined to answer this. But it seems that she did have information that the police didn't. As Michael would refuse to speak to them, she could get close, she could get him talking, she had the videos and things like that he'd already done. So it is believed that she really did help and helped gain the media coverage to try and help file charges against him, really. And for Sarah, it is far from over. She plans on attending every court hearing. All she can hope for is a fair trial for Alissa and her father. All she ever wanted was for them both to have their day in court. I'm glad that Michael may finally serve justice for his crime. And I'm glad that her sister never gave up hope on it. I found this case so sad. Such a controlling man over Alissa. And possibly in the end, he couldn't bear to let her go. And eventually she would leave his control. She was 17, she was getting older. There would become a stage, especially if he was abusing her, that she would leave and that she would move out. Maybe he couldn't bear to handle that. Maybe, like Sarah said, he'd sexually advanced himself towards her and she refused. She said that she was going to tell someone. And maybe that's why he stole her life. I can't say that he definitely did kill Alissa because, well, I just don't know. That is for the court to decide. But I can say that his story was very strange. He kept changing it and I do believe he was such a controlling man. Like I said, Michael's been arrested in relation to Alissa's case, but hasn't been given a sentence yet, so obviously more information will be coming out on the case. Personally, I believe the same as Sarah, that maybe her version of events was what actually happened, but the truth is we don't actually know what happened to Alissa on that day. I'm hoping that, obviously, with the court hearings and the trial and whatever else, that maybe the information will come to light, because the truth is no one actually knows what happened to Alissa that day, except possibly Michael. Who knows, maybe when everything happens and it all comes out, maybe we will all finally know what actually happened to her. If you have any other cases that you'd like me to look into, please do let me know and I'll look into them for you. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of Alissa Turney. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.